What we really use AI for primarily is a lot of the research and preparation stage of putting together a listing. It's great for uncovering blind spots, especially if you're selling something that you are not the target customer. It's very easy to just be oblivious to some of the things that a customer might care about. But then also, where does a human need to step in? And how do you find a way to make both be able to do what they do well?
Listing optimization is a powerful tool for e-commerce sellers. And this discussion goes in depth on how you should be utilizing AI to improve your listings. But not just that, it goes beyond that. There's a deeper level discussion here around what aspects of listing optimization and selling in general you need to have a balance of integrating technology and retaining your humanity to maximize results. And so you'll find this in the discussion with Emma today, that we talk about what is that right balance of using AI and still retaining some of what makes you you. Emma has her hands in so many different aspects of listing optimizations for some really big clients and a lot of clients as well. And Emma's stance on how much we should be utilizing AI and not over leveraging it, but using it in an appropriate way is really, really, really good. One of the biggest points that she makes in this episode is that a lot more people are starting to use AI, but they're not using it in a very intelligent way. And the result of that is non-valuable content production from a lot of people. So my goal is for you from this episode is to develop a more intelligent strategy and a more intelligent way to leverage AI for your listing and for your brand and beyond. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's a special one. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Human in the Loop. Today, I'm joined by Emma. And Emma and I, we actually go way, way back. I mean, I think our first podcast was probably like, gosh, I don't know, 5 years ago? That's weird to say. Was it? I don't even remember. It's been
a while, yeah.
It's been a while. It's been a while. And I outlined this in the intro, but the conversation today revolves around artificial intelligence and technology leveraged in optimizing your listing. And that comes down to a couple different parts of your listing. We'll get there when we get there. But Emma, first, can you give just a brief overview of Marketing by Emma, and we can go from there?
Absolutely. So as you suggested, we've been in this space for a while. We started Marketing by Emma back at the end of 2016. So we've been in this space for a long time. We've seen it evolve quite a bit. Where we really shine is helping brands connect in with their brand identity and being able to communicate that in a way that's going to strategically position them to be able to stand out from their competition and really forge connection with their customers. So it's not even just a purely transactional thing, but we're trying to encourage repeat purchases, word of mouth referrals, and really thinking about how, whether you're on Amazon or elsewhere, how you're able to leverage something like a product page to start to grow something bigger that is going to allow your brand to grow and expand wherever it is that you're looking to take it.
Yep. And these conversations, especially around listings, I think in people's minds, it's like just words, but it's so much more than that. And our conversations usually delve into that brand aspect a bit. So I'm excited to get to that. But again, the conversation largely revolves around this intersection of technology and what makes us human, and specific and around the context of listing ops. So let's talk about, I want to talk about, I think it's good to outline like the challenge of today and how much that challenge has changed. You mentioned being immersed as this whole space has changed, right? So Emma, you're involved in this like so much. What would you say, or what are the greatest and most common challenges that sellers are facing today when creating effective product listings?
So one of the biggest things that AI has done is it's leveled the playing field. And so before, just purely by having a well put together listing, even if it wasn't the most compelling copy in the world, just by being good English, by being well written, by looking nice, that was a pretty significant advantage that you could have as a seller. And that's really kind of disappeared. Of course, we can still find plenty of examples of really questionably cobbled together content
Yeah,
out
of
there.
course.
But those are becoming far fewer because regardless of where you are in the world, what your native language is, or what budget you have, you're able to create something decent. And so
Yep.
that really creates a new challenge where you have a leveling of the playing field, but simultaneously a lot of noise being created. And it's not even just on Amazon, it's everywhere, right? We're
Yep.
being increasingly more flooded with content because it's so easy to create lots of mediocre content. And so then it really requires an added level of strategy and thought going into how to differentiate yourself in an increasingly more crowded and more sort of swampy space. It's easy to kind of get sucked in by the undertow and get lost.
Yeah, of course. No, the core of this conversation is so interesting because it kind of backs the word that you used was mediocre content. And Google has come out recently and put out changes in their algorithm for the way that they rank AI-based content. And there's a debate over exactly how they're doing it and what the impact is. But Google states specifically like not prioritizing AI content that doesn't provide value, right? And there's an interesting point here of AI democratizing access and accessibility to like leveling up in certain ways, but that not necessarily indicating quality and creating, like you said, a bunch of noise. That's a weird mixture of challenges because of like putting people on a similar playing field, but then also not just automatically making the value stand out. That's tough.
I don't know. Do you follow Neil Patel?
I do.
He's been creating a lot of really interesting content lately because they have an agency in addition to all of the content that they create. And so they have access to a lot of data that most people might not because they can go wide across a lot of categories. And so he's had some really interesting content come out about comparing how AI generated content versus human generated content, or at least AI assisted, but human sort of like with the human touch put onto it performs significantly better. And one of the main things that he talked about is because it increases engagement, because it's giving us those things that AI is not capable of giving us. So we want to hear about a specific experience that kind of gives a more tangible grasp of this topic, or we want to hear about the case study that you did that demonstrated this in action, or perhaps an interesting connection that a computer is not going to naturally make. And so this, I think, probably leads into a little bit of the next question that I anticipate you asking of how to be able to leverage AI to be more effective and get more done. But then also where does a human need to step in? How do you find a way to make both be able to do what they do well?
And that's the transition into this is talking. I like, talking explicitly about, okay, what parts of AI should people be using? But let's chip away at this conversation. Let's start there, and then I kind of want to, after going through like the AI tools and the strategies people should be using, because that's what people want to hear. The underlying, like, really more important part of that is like what part of retaining your humanity and integrating you as a person should go into those tools. Let's start with the tool. Let's start with the tools, though. Let's start there, and then we'll get to the core of this. So, listing up AI tools. What's your recommendation here?
So first, I would like to say before we dive into the
Okay.
tools that I think what's going to serve, because the fact of the matter is that all of this is changing so quickly. So
Mhm.
whatever we talk about may or may, as far as the specific tools or the specific strategies, may not be relevant in 3 or 6 months or a year from now. And
Crazy.
so I think it's really important, especially now that we're about a year and a half or so from when ChatGPT first sort of came in the game and started to revolutionize how accessible AI was to the average person, is what are like the overarching principles to
Mhm.
keep in mind, so that as the tools might change and as some of the specific techniques of using the tools might change, understanding the bigger picture will allow you to more seamlessly be able to continue to adapt and
Mm.
stay on top of whatever is working now. So I just felt like it was
That's good.
important to preface that.
That's a good
As
preface.
far as far as tools, honestly, we're pretty basic. Like we primarily find that ChatGPT 4 serves us really well for almost everything that we want to do.
Okay.
Whenever we've experimented with some of the other more specific tools, be they tools for Amazon listing optimization or for content creation, essentially those are all just skins
Mm.
on
Yep.
um, one of the AI sort of like core, whether it's OpenAI or
You like
Anthropic.
plugging into OpenAI basically.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they've essentially prompted and created a certain set like architecture that they've determined this is what a good title should be for an Amazon listing, or this is
Mm.
what a great set of bullets should look like. And
Yep.
I've just found that there is not yet any way with the tools and we've tested a lot of tools. We have a full blog post that tests probably like 10 or 15 of these different tools and gives our
Well,
ratings and everything. But we all kind of circle back to the same issues, which is there's not enough input in order to customize the content enough to the specific brand and product.
yep.
And so the way that we really use AI the most in our processes is using ChatGPT. We do also dabble with Claude and
Mhm.
we're kind of always testing
But in
out.
terms of like 90% of the return on investment for people to learn, I'm getting from you is like, if you learn ChatGPT, then you will gain a large majority of the benefit here.
Yeah, and you're just going to have so much more flexibility in what you can
Sure.
do and get it closer to what you're aiming for. And so what we really use AI for primarily is a lot of the research and preparation stage of putting
Okay.
together a listing. It's great for uncovering blind spots,
Mm.
especially if you're selling something that you are not the target customer. Then it's very easy to just be oblivious to
Mhm.
some of the things that a customer might care about. And so it's really great for identifying those types of details. It's also really fantastic at being able to identify patterns. Like if you're running it to review a lot of reviews and then digest that and tell you what are the biggest positives, what are the biggest negatives, what are the other things that people are talking about. Obviously, you could do that yourself, but that's very time consuming and it's going to
Sure.
do a better job at being able to identify some of those through lines that you might not even notice. It's
Mm.
also really great for writer's block and just for ideation. So it's pretty rare that we would prompt it, get a piece of content and say that's perfect. But that piece of content might stimulate some ideas of, oh yeah, I can take that piece and then I can, switch out some of those words. And then that's giving me a good sense of how I want to approach this part of the A plus
Mm.
content or.
So those are good categories to kind of break down. I'm especially interested to talk through like the review aggregation and like output of summary of certain things like that. But I kind of want to start from a point of like a couple examples. So if you could tell me like are you starting from, where are you starting integrating ChatGPT? Let's just say we're using that as the primary tool here. Are you starting from scratch in terms of like doing research around the brand, the customer you mentioned, like, or are you starting like ideating yourself and then going to ChatGPT and getting some ideas worked through and then going back to filling in the gaps? Well, like, what does your workflow look like?
Yeah. So we first receive a brief from the client. And so that's our initial entryway into getting to know their brand and their product. And at that stage, our team actually does a lot of preliminary research and outlining and preparation with the assistance of AI for those different pieces. So we do the
Yep.
keyword research, we do all of those things that are providing a foundation. So then, so that's actually done by the project management side. And then that gets handed over to the writer, who then has a lot of the research already summarized and aggregated for them. And then they're able to actually spend more time going deeper, surveying the competitive landscape and really putting together how they want to strategically position. And so they're probably at that stage going to be doing more human-based research and then just adding in the AI as needed if there are gaps. And then the writer, where they are really using the AI, is more as an assistive tool for ideation, for rephrasing, for just expanding how you might actually communicate about certain things, even for concepts. So, thinking about what kinds of pictures would be a good way to represent that, melatonin is great for, I don't know where
Sleep
I'm
aid.
going.
Yeah. No,
These examples.
no. Well, meaning, I got you. Meaning that like these are prompts that you're like, that's an example of a prompt that you're putting into ChatGPT to get ideas down. Like, what is a good way to represent my product in an image?
Give me 10 examples of images demonstrating how melatonin is great for jet lag. So maybe the most obvious one is somebody on an airplane, but are there other types of images that don't immediately come to mind that would also be really great at communicating this concept that would allow you to also stand apart, knowing that there are already 10 other products that are more or less featuring that exact same image because it is the most obvious one? And so is there a less obvious iteration of that would be equally as powerful, that would be setting you apart?
Got it. Are there nice thumbs up? Are there let's talk about some of these prompts, I think, because I'm trying to get in the mind of, like, let's say you're talking to someone that has a pre-existing listing that probably could be improved, right? Where would you suggest they start? The examples you gave were perfect. Those are like such good examples of, like, we're still not just exclusively relying on ChatGPT to like give us the answer. We're trusting ourselves to take in some of these prompted results and then mix it together and like move forward, right? So let's talk about, like, that's a great prompt for an image. Are there other examples that you think people should know when it comes to listing ops for like ChatGPT? Like, what are some of those essential things you would suggest people really try to do with ChatGPT right now?
Yeah. So one that it just instantly pops into my mind is give me a list of, I don't know if you're this way, but I always, maybe this is that Midwestern thing that we were talking about before we started recording, but I am very polite with how I talk to my AI. So
that's funny.
Give me isn't how I would
like,
phrase it.
Please.
I would say, like, please.
Could you please provide me with a list of Hey, when AI takes over in 15 years, they're going to remember that you were very polite. That's you're for thinking ahead.
But please give me a list of all of the potential benefits why somebody would like to buy a a melatonin supplement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, something you want to always be aware of is fact checking everything. So I feel like that was a conversation that isn't as prevalent currently as it used to be. But I just had a conversation with someone a few days ago who was putting together a presentation and wanted to include some quotes by Simon Sinek, who wrote the book Start With Why and a couple of other big bestsellers. And like, he got these quotes and he's like, wow, these are great. These are perfect quotes. Exactly what I want. Goes to look them up. They're not real quotes. They're quotes that sound like Simon Sinek.
No way.
And in the sort of, from his perspective, but he did not actually ever say those things.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I would think to fact check if I'm asking for give me specific quotes. And then when he asked the AI, like the AI kind of came out and said, well, these would be things that he would say on this topic, which is wild.
Wow.
Yes. So always make sure to validate that the information that you're getting is legitimate. That's just we don't want to forget to do those things because they are important and they could be problematic if you're just always taking things verbatim and not really contemplating whether they make sense for what you're doing. So that's a great one. Another one area that we haven't really spoken about yet that is taking a little bit of a step back to what we're doing on that foundational level is using it to create some customer avatars and even a profile, like a brand identity around around the inputs that we have from the customers. So that's going to start to give us a sense of who we're talking to and how to position the brand. So it's giving a little bit of headway on some of those things. So being able to get a customer avatar that's really specific, that we know that we're speaking to Jane, who is 55 and is at the peak of her career and is traveling. I'm just continuing on this melatonin.
Sure.
She's traveling all the time, and she needs to make sure that when she arrives in a country, she's able to really easily sync up to a healthy schedule because she has early morning meetings in which she's presenting to big, high up groups of people in the organization. And so the melatonin not only allows her to be able to thrive in the workspace, but also then when she gets home to be able to sync up and enjoy time with her husband and her friends. So that kind of specificity is bringing in, oddly enough, it's using AI to bring in that human element that then allows you to speak very pointedly and specifically to who your customer is, instead of talking in very broad and not necessarily as resonant.
So do you come to, let's say, ChatGPT? Do you come to ChatGPT with your persona and say, give me the list, please, of examples for this prompt based on this persona? Is that kind of like how this helps you get further and further down, a little bit more specific, pull out different ideas rather than just being general? Like,
what benefits would Jane find most important rather than, so it's like, one is give me all the benefits, which that can be really helpful too. And that's not just for, that can also be for if you're doing product research or you're considering a whole, a rebrand or whatever. But being able to add in that extra layer of specificity is going to give you more impactful outputs that may start to be the things that can help you stand out in that, big, wide sea
pool of AI copy. Yeah. And that's I think seemingly what's happening, just observation wise, is that so many people are just using ChatGPT for the general, but they're not going that one or two levels deeper to say, here's my persona, give me 10 examples of how this could benefit them, or 10 images that might connect with them if based on this persona, right? Like that's going to, and that the beauty of ChatGPT is that if you do that one or two that go those levels deeper, it will produce different results. Like typically, not all the time, but it will like churn out different things than the general answers that it gives based on questions like that. That's a great call out. So let's talk about the review aggregation a little bit. What do you suggest people do for plugging in reviews? Like, what's the main output of that for putting reviews into ChatGPT?
So that you can do it in one of two ways. Either you can have it review your competitors' reviews or your own, or both. You know, some of it will depend on what data you have. If you're launching a new product, you don't have your own reviews to go off of.
Right.
If you do, those can give all sorts of great insights, not only in how to position your product, but maybe even things that you might want to either iterate on for a line extension or improve upon. So there can be great insights on that regard. But the main things that you would be asking it to look for is, summarize all of the negative reasons why somebody was unhappy with this product. Summarize all of the reasons why people love this product. Make a list of all of the main points that the reviews mention. Because there can be neutral things that would also be important, that it's not.
Are you copying and pasting? Is it copy and paste, or is it copying and pasting text from your reviews? Like people should just go to their reviews and copy and paste
there's a way. I would need to look up the specific way that my team is currently doing it. I will admit that I am not doing this part, but I can find that information for it. I know we've tested. There are some tools that
they're
say
plugins. I know they're plugins. Yeah.
We haven't found super great results from using those.
Yeah. For the sake of accuracy, I think copy and paste and accessibility. I think just going to your reviews and copying and pasting the list of sort by negative, all negative reviews, copy negative reviews, and paste into ChatGPT. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. I'm fairly certain that is the current process. But
so there's a second part of all this, the very human element, right? Like how should people, because I think I'm trying to get in the mind of the listener here. Like, not everyone is a master of AI, and not everyone is a master of copywriting, and we're also thinking about things from the human perspective here. Realistically, what is the best way to find that balance of interacting with AI? What is the best way to approach that?
So I think one of the real mistakes that people make when it comes to AI is prioritizing speed above all else. So it was one of the biggest things, especially when this first came out. Oh, it can make all these things so much faster and more efficient. And it absolutely can. And there's great benefit and time saving in lots of things. But it's not that means that you should only be spending 5 minutes doing your listing optimization. What that actually means is that it frees up more time to also be thinking more deeply. So you're kind of trading out speed on some things. And then if you're really wanting to leverage this effectively, you want to replace some of that time that you would have been using doing other parts of this that are now automated, and using that to be thoughtful and be strategic. And if it doesn't come naturally to you, then first of all, you might consider whether this is something that's worth you doing. I can do a lot of things with AI that I'm still not going to be able to do as good of a job as somebody who is an expert at it. And so this is a really integral part of whether you're going to be successful with selling your product. If you are not able to position your product in an effective way that is going to convert the right customers and drive the sales that you need, then that is just something to be considering. But if you feel like this is something that you want to learn to do, then one of the best things that you can do is to start actually tapping into your experiences as a customer and to be observant of, how am I interacting with my purchasing decisions, and what is standing out to me when I am online and scrolling through either an Amazon search results page, or I'm on TikTok, or wherever you are, and starting to identify and recognize what those brands are doing well.
Yep.
And also maybe what other brands are not doing well. And then thinking about how you can start to translate those into your own efforts, because it's one of the things that is going to prevent you from getting better at this is you need to be able to understand how all of this is working in order to be able to do a really strong job. If you're just kind of, if you're just reading, okay, if I switch out tip for secret, then this will be stronger.
Like casually approaching this. Yes.
That might add a little bit of a boost, but those superficial things are not necessarily going to move the needle in the way that you need them to if you're not also doing these things. And another important point to consider is when we're talking about things like the customer avatar, like your brand identity, these are not isolated to your listing optimization. These are really things that you need to be thinking about and incorporating and being mindful of in all of the different aspects of your business, from your customer service to your packaging design to your website. All of this should be influenced by these choices that you're making. And so, yes.
Emma, how many brands do you work with that don't have their persona built out?
Almost
like
none of them.
Really?
Yes.
Seriously? Oh no. Oh no.
Even
okay.
Brands, I'm shocked by how many big brands do not have clarity on that. And I think one of the big reasons why is because it requires a level of bravery to start to get specific about these things. And it's very tempting to go wide. And I think that you could also go wide a few years ago and be successful. And that's just, things have started to change pretty profoundly, not just on Amazon, but really throughout all of the, product space, and not even just products, all the things that we're buying and consuming. And so that's why you see brands like Liquid Death or Elf Cosmetics being so successful. And another example of this is, are you familiar with Chewy?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
It's a pet products marketplace.
Yep.
And it's very clear to me that they've really thought through some of these things. Definitely. So I ordered from them a week ago, and they forgot to include one of the items in the package, which is frustrating and annoying. And I was a little bit irritated when I opened the box, realized that it didn't have the joint supplement that I needed for my dog. And so I shoot off an email. They responded really quickly. They were apologetic, but they were also like, we know how much you and Pickle is my dog, count on us. And we're really sorry that we dropped the ball. And we've already sent out an order for this item. It'll be there in a couple of days. Please give Pickle some extra belly rubs and tell him that we're sorry. And instantly, I wasn't angry. I was like, okay.
You're like, okay, Pickle is named. Yeah, that's game over.
And apparently they send flowers when an animal dies. They sent flowers to my grandma when her dog died, because a lot of people are on the auto replenish of, they're just automatically getting the food sent every few weeks or a month. And so she received the bag of dog food, didn't need it. They sent flowers and they said, donate the food to a shelter.
And they know who they're interact. They know that they're engaging with pet owners. They know their persona.
Yes. And so I would say a flip side of that is there is a new commercial that I just saw recently by Skechers, the shoe company.
Yeah.
And first of all, they're slip-on shoes, which I know is copying a very successful D2C brand, Kizik, of this like special way that you can just slip into them. But then they're also kind of stealing from Tom's shoes and buy a shoe and we do something good. Except the thing that they're doing good is they're donating to pet shelters. And there's just like no connection with any of this. And it was very confusing. It felt not well thought through. It didn't feel in line with who their brand is. It didn't feel in line with who their customer is. And I think it was a real lost opportunity, but it stems back to perhaps not having done enough of that initial groundwork so that they could have a campaign that would be more effective and resonant with customers.
Yep, definitely. And as there's one aspect of this, I think it's like this next generation of buyers. You often hear this conversation, and not just this next generation, but just like millennial, Gen Z, Alpha, and beyond are becoming, as they become more in tune with who they're buying from, I think this will only become more and more important. Like young shoppers are I think are very intelligent in the sense that they just understand some of these nuances, even if it's not intentional, and even if it's like on a subconscious level, they feel and understand when they're being marketed to or sold to by a brand that's just putting general language or messaging out there versus a brand that knows them. And I think this conversation, this episode is like AI and copywriting, but I think the core part I hope people get the most from this is exactly what you're talking about, this importance of like imbuing brand identity into everything that you do. And then seemingly the usage of AI, if that foundation is set, the usage of AI to do all these nuanced tasks will be much, much better, much more nuanced themselves, and much more detailed, going off of that foundation that you built and the foundation that you plug into AI.
Exactly. And you're also training your AI on your brand voice and on your customer avatar. So you're getting more curated outputs that are not just generalized to any brand of melatonin, but specific to your brand and the customer that you're targeting. And so that's going to make it so that when you're asking for examples of some quippy short text to add into your product images or your A+ content, it's going to be much closer to what you would actually be wanting to use, even in its raw form, versus what you would get if you just opened up a new chat and prompted it kind of blindly.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Okay, landing the plane. I think that we'll probably have to have more conversations about this later, another time, because I think this conversation took it headed in a different direction. I'm glad it did, because we're attacking the core roots of this whole thing that people should pay attention to. I'm curious if you can. There are two questions to end this. The first is, can you give the listeners what's a very like applicable action step? Like, I think there's a lot of conversation around brand identity here and around some very specific ways to use and leverage AI. How would you suggest, what action step would you give people to do to integrate, just even start the process of integrating AI into their listings in an intelligent way? And then the flip side, the last question is the one that is a speculative one. And that's, what does the future of e-commerce look like, knowing everything that's happening now? So let's start with that first question. What would you say is a very applicable action step that people can take away from this?
So I would say, if you don't have a customer avatar, use AI to create one. And it doesn't have to be only one. You could have a few. But start to take steps towards narrowing who you're talking to a little bit and see how that informs and shapes all of the other choices that you make, because that's going to then influence the kind of language that you're using. So like, let's just look at Liquid Death for an example.
Yep.
They recognize there are some people that are going to be horrified and disgusted and angry about some of the things that they do with marketing. Like I recently saw one and it was a little girl holding a can, which their cans look like a Guinness beer if you're not familiar with them.
Yep.
And it was something like, look like an alcoholic. Like it
Yep.
was very
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And the commercial of kids drinking, the commercial of kids drinking out of it. Yes. Yes.
Oh, but they realized that this very edgy marketing is going to absolutely delight their core customer base. And that's why people are tattooing the logo on their bodies and why they generated millions of dollars in merch sales.
In merch. Yes. Liquid Death knows that they are not for everyone, and they are okay with that. Yes. And so you don't have to go to those extremes. You can go to the opposite end of the extreme. You can be the most wholesome company that, ever was in your category. So you don't have to be pushing those kinds of buttons if that is not in line with your brand and your customer avatar, but thinking about where you can start to get more specific and just see what happens, how that shifts the decisions that you're making, the voice that you're using, the types of images that you are putting into your product, because if we're going back to Jane, if the images on our product page are all pictures of young people that are in their 20s with the melatonin throughout their lives, and Jane is a 55-year-old professional, even if you're saying things that are relating to Jane, she's not going to be feeling them because she's seen all of these images that are not relatable. And that's kind of what Skechers in some ways is doing in a different way. So that would be the thing that I would, the big recommendation that I would make to people. And even if you have a customer avatar, is that the best one for what you're selling? If you've been selling for a while, maybe who you thought your avatar was going to be is different than who they actually are. You might have some customer data even that you can use to begin to adjust that. But that's where I really think that everyone would benefit from spending some time on. That's really, really good. And the future, what do you think the future is going to look like, knowing all the changes that are happening now?
So many changes. Like one of the things that the moment that you asked me this question, where my mind instantly went was actually the way that the whole influencer space is changing, because I think that is signaling a lot of these other things that we're talking about, which is essentially people are looking for opportunities for connection. People are only more drawn to humanity and the things that are specifically human. So that if we see these micro influencers that are selling massive amounts on TikTok, they're not the people that are the most curated, that are the most put together, that are the most beautiful. They're the ones that maybe are the most relatable specifically to me. So we're talking about hyper segmentation and simultaneously figuring out ways to be able to connect more deeply with the people that we're selling to. And so I think that those two pieces are only going to become more important for brands to figure out if they want to continue to not only stay relevant, but stay profitable and stay in business.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think that's a really good take. It's interesting to see things change so fast as well. You mentioned that who knows if this conversation will be relevant 3 to 6 months down the line. I think because we talked about the core of what's important to retain, especially with the use of AI, perhaps the tools themselves will change and whatever you're doing at the top, but the core of your business and your brand and what it means to be human in a world that's becoming more and more integrated with technology, that's That is, and mixing that with the intelligence of the consumer becoming more a factor. That's my personal take. I only see that the core of that foundation becoming more and more important, and I think that's why this conversation is so important. So, Emma, thank you so much for talking through things. Thanks for giving all this advice and your perspective. I'll put your information in the show notes, in the description, everything, so people can find you and reach out to you as well, your social, your website as well. And I'm looking forward to having you back on. But thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for hosting me and for geeking out on all these topics with me today.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Human in the Loop. My name is Cameron, and I said this at the very end, but I highly suggest you connect, follow Emma on social, connect with her on her website. I'll put her information in the show notes below. And thank you so much for joining me on this journey, finding the intersection of human and machine. Until next time.